This is Festival Sounds. Happy New Year, Tilly.
Happy New Year, Bilal.
What a way to start 2025. We've got a really cool guy I know. He's called Keenan. He's going to join us all the way from South Africa. He has worked dozens of festivals as not just a security guard, as the supervisor and team leader, the guy in charge of the security guards. Not just that, he's worked in the control centers for festivals as well. How cool is this guy?
He sounds super interesting. I can't wait to ask him what's his craziest thing he's ever seen at a festival, or, coolest thing you've ever seen at a festival, and just delve more into security life, because I don't really know much about it.
I'm going to ask him who the troublemakers are, because that's what you really want to know.
Yeah.
And does he enjoy conflict? Do security guards want that conflict, or are they just trying to have a quiet shift? Are you curious about that?
I'm very curious, and also how he got into it, because it's not something I've ever considered in my life. So how do you become a security guard?
These are the questions Festival Sounds should be asking. When someone says they're a security guard, why are you a security guard?
Why are you a security guard? What life choices did you make that ended up being a security guard at a festival? Yeah, exactly.
It's going to be a good episode. This is Festival Sounds. This is Festival Sounds. I'm Bilal.
And I'm Tilly.
And we have our wonderful first guest of 2025, Keenan.
Hello, Bilal. Hey, Tilly. Great to be on.
Thanks for coming.
So, Keenan, when we first met, you were actually running a team of security guards at Worthy View at Glastonbury. And someone had come over to me to say how impressed they were with you because you had challenged someone in authority on their behaviour. And they said, this is a very impressive young man. So I came over with a pack of biscuits and went, hey, buddy, how are you? Do you want to have a chat? And that's how we first met. Do you remember that?
I do remember. I do. And it was very touching because, we don't always get the very best remarks, sometimes behavior working in security. And I think I had said to you then that when someone treats you nicely, particularly if it's another sort of member of staff or someone you're working with, it is something that's brought up when we kind of debrief or talk amongst ourselves. So, very grateful for that biscuit then and for meeting you.
The age-old way to make friends, just offering up biscuits.
You can't go wrong.
It works with the stewards because you're meeting people for the first time. You're probably going to do 3 shifts together. And it's a nice way to do an introduction. And they think, I'm just glad this guy isn't a dick. Because you want the supervisor to be at least tolerable. And that's what I'm aiming for. Not everybody, even those who work at the festival, are necessarily that nice. Because if you're saying you had a debrief and you said nice things, I'm sure there's a debrief where you don't say nice things because people have been unpleasant.
Yeah, in a couple of festivals. And it's important to obviously to note that it's not everyone, of course. And you do have, nice people such as yourselves, but also people who aren't so nice as well. So sometimes you get people who don't otherwise sometimes appreciate the role that security has to do, because security by its very nature is contentious. Literally, you are almost certainly dealing with people who have some kind of a dispute, and sometimes that can be quite a difficult thing to navigate. Yeah.
When we met, you were 22, something like that. Recently graduated. How did you get into security?
I was studying at university, and one of the big security companies in the area that's based in Lancaster was actually a sponsor of the rugby club, rugby union team. And so, as normal student sponsorships go, in return for the club receiving some money from the security company, they were allowed to basically speak to us and try and recruit us for the kind of events. And security company I worked for had about 50-60% of its operations in kind of events and festivals, which is something really exciting, particularly, to young, kind of strong, boisterous rugby players at university. It was something that sounded really interesting. Something like
it's like a school of bouncers. That's what I'm picturing. It's like bouncer training.
It certainly was, to an extent. I mean, especially, if you are a security company looking for, I don't know, kind of stereotypically, young, strong people, then, where else to look than a rugby club, I guess.
Burly men is what they're looking for.
Absolutely, yeah. And so from there, I essentially said, well, it sounds like an interesting opportunity. You make a bit of money over the summer, might get a chance to go see these festivals, essentially for free. Turned what started out as maybe like a small opportunity just to see what would happen, turned into a 2.5-year period doing something I really, really enjoyed. That's essentially how I got set up. So I started out as a steward, which is an unlicensed kind of position. You can't really engage with people too much in a type of security type of way. And then decided to do my license and then worked in that capacity for about two and a half years. Yeah.
It must have been a very difficult offer to turn down as a student if someone says to you, come to festivals and we'll give you money.
For sure. Honestly, it's really great.
And if somebody is giving you grief, you get to rugby tackle them and you get to say this to a rugby player, and where do I sign is going to be the answer.
It's so interesting that, I think it's interesting that you said, obviously you're interested in music and stuff, because I don't know if it's just a misconception I have, but I always think of security as not being as interested in the music as say a steward. I think of them at festivals as maybe kind of being maybe more there for the money than the festival side of it. So I'd never really thought about, obviously security are going to be into music and into festivals. That's why they're there. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yes, exactly. There are lots of kind of opportunities like that. Yeah.
The first thing I do when I start my shift as a volunteer, I go over to the security guards in that area and I say, thank you for looking after my stewards for me. Because, look, I'm not going to do it. Like you said, I'm a steward in a tabard. I'm going to make some digs at someone's dress sense if they're being mean and do some psychological damage. But the actual physical welfare, the security guards they have your back.
Bilal's not doing any tackling anytime soon.
I will raise my voice and give them a very stern look, a glare. And so that's the first thing I do, because I genuinely appreciate that team of security guards, particularly an overnight shift when it can be really quiet and you're isolated. These men and women have your back, but I'm assuming you're not always perceived that way.
No, certainly not. And just before I go into that part about thanking security officers, if there's anyone who's listening to this podcast, and if you genuinely have felt quite reassured and felt safe in their presence and stuff like that, it is very much appreciated to approach them and just say a quick thank you. Doesn't have to be much, but I promise you, as we kind of referenced before the podcast and in the beginning, it really does go a long way, and it is talked about. We are grateful for it. In terms of the have I ever been assumed to be an adrenaline junkie? Am I just there to rugby tackle people and make sure people have a miserable time, grab you by the collar, fling you out, and and all that? Definitely, for sure, that has happened. I can remember a couple of times, not just in events and festivals, but also in nightclubs. There is an assumption that you're just there to fling people out, that if people are kind of misbehaving, not in a way that requires you to be thrown out of the nightclub, but that involves me going up and saying, hey, put that away, you can't vape inside, we have to confiscate that off you. Then there might be a comment like, oh, fuck off, are you gonna beat me up now? Yeah, what are you gonna do? What, kind of putting the arms up and trying to instigate you into fighting as well. So yeah, and you just kind of have to prove people wrong, because a really big, that assumption is that, we might be there to just kind of like fight. But I can assure you, when I kind of went in, I realized that, especially all during the training, and it was really, really emphasized that putting your hands on someone really has to be the last kind of resort. That really the best type of conflict resolution is one that involves no kind of hands at all. I can actually remember during my training, I have a small anecdote. Actually, it was fantastic. It was quite funny, but it was great. So during one of the aspects of getting your license, so the kind of assessments you have to do to get your license as a door supervisor is physical intervention and conflict management. And when I was doing my training, we had an instructor there. He was many years of like Brazilian jiu-jitsu and stuff like that, working security, really nice guy. And he used me as a kind of dummy during one of those lessons for like conflict management. Who wants to volunteer? I said, me, I'll do it. I thought it was fun. And he said, okay, I'm going to show you a really crazy way to like resolve a dispute. Just wait for it. And then he tells me, grab onto my, not my shirt, my arm. He says, hold onto my arm really tightly. I grab it. He says, really, really tightly, make sure you've got it on, like something's going to happen. I said, okay, yeah, I've got it. And then he looks at me and he kind of shouts, let go. And I let go. And then he turns to the class and say, best way. That's how you do it.
I bet you're expecting to be like flipped over, like literally body slammed. That's it.
Genuinely, honestly, especially when I kind of knew about like his profile as someone who'd been doing like, I think it was jiu-jitsu, martial art. I thought, oh my God, am I going to be like flung out? But when he did that, he emphasized like in a serious way, like really, like if you can like end, hostility purely by words and not by physically intervening with someone, then that is the best way to do it, for sure.
And there you were, Tilly, making fun of me using my big voice.
Your big boy voice. Honestly,
I'm pants on and I'm going to shout at you.
I'm
and
so
then
impressed.
What are you going to do, mister?
Yeah. Someone needs to tell your mum.
I definitely stop. You can't say, I know your mother, because it sounds like the start of a very, very bad dig, and you're representing an organisation. Although I do think of those jokes.
I'm always so impressed by like just having the ability to de-escalate situations is so impressive. So I feel like I need to go on this training that you're talking about. I need to learn how to de-escalate, because it's hard, especially when you've got people who are like angry or have maybe been waiting out in the sun all day and like have problems with their tickets or like something. There's always a reason to be angry. So it's so impressive that like that's something that you can do.
For sure. Like there's all manner of problems that people kind of go through in terms of like being hungry, like you've said, waiting out. Particularly people have problems maybe like getting in. Some of the biggest fights I think I've encountered are people who haven't entered the venue yet, whether it's queuing, whether it's, oh, my ticket doesn't work properly and stuff like that. And then the kind of like almost looking for a fight a little bit. So yeah, you definitely get that. But de-escalation is a real skill, and outside of security, just real good in your normal life as well. Just kind of interacting with people, for sure.
I have to say the most annoying people I've encountered are the ones who have a legit ticket, but for some reason are being difficult on their first entry into the festival. That's always the most annoying people. And they're normally speaking with an unnecessarily posh accent. They're the worst ones.
They're like,
Sorry, am I allowed to say that?
They're like, don't you know how long I've been waiting? And I'm like, yeah, everybody else around you has also been waiting a long time. You're not the only one.
You don't need to join in on this, but it's the poshos I have a problem with.
Are you thinking of one festival in particular? Because I know I am.
Exactly thinking of that festival. Anyway, we digress. Those frustrations then, or that you're dealing with when you're security, are there some festivals that are better than others? I'm not asking you to name the terrible ones because I appreciate it's your profession, but does the type of clientele affect it? And is it necessarily what you think it is? Are the troublemakers the people you think they are going to be?
I think I think sometimes they are and sometimes they aren't. Just to go into a little bit more detail, sometimes we are told in the kind of brief. So we'll usually get there maybe a day or two before the festival. And I suppose we're talking about like the summer kind of camping festivals, which is what my company kind of did a lot of. And sometimes we were told by like the managers right at the top when we were given, kind of like a tour through the grounds and stuff, they would say, historically, this festival might have this kind of problem, or we have people who do try to jump over fences and kind of do that. We do have instances relating to this or that, and we have to kind of deal with that. So we do get a heads up in that sense, which is quite good. But other times it is really quite unexpected. And I remember one, obviously, like you sort of referenced before, I won't mention it by name, but it was a festival that happened in the south. I wouldn't say where, but it had a fairly big kind of population of people that went, like 40, 50,000. And we were told it would be mostly populated by young people. Of my kind of 2.5-year period working, it was definitely the largest kind of festival that attracted people who were between, I'd say, something like 18 and like 22. It's quite a young person's festival. And like can remember
people like Tilly is what you're saying. Troublemakers like Tilly.
The troublemakers.
Yeah.
I know the type.
Although I'm sure Tilly is absolutely perfect, and she would not have been one of the people.
I always thank security. Thank you very much, Bill.
Yeah, get a couple of Stellas in her. She changes, right?
And she changes.
I roll up my sleeves and it's time.
Yeah, no, honestly, but yeah, it was at this festival that we had like a number of problems, and I was told it would be like a bit jumpy, but I didn't think it'd be anything worse than we normally have. But the worst incident I can remember is actually when there was, and we were told this is something that happens. So the camping areas where people set up their tents were kind of sectioned off by these giant hedges. And every year it was said that these kind of wars, quote unquote, or camp wars, something like that would occur. And people would literally pick up the first thing they could find and lob it over these fences without any care in the world as to who it would hit. And maybe, it would be just like really irritating stuff if it was something small and I don't know, just papers and small things like you're littering. Of course, it's not acceptable, but whatever, it's irritating more than anything. But people who go and start throwing pieces of like camping equipment or like nearby kind of hard objects that they can find is terrible. And it actually happened to me. There was a kind of fight that broke up, and when security were called, I was working in response at the time, which just means that we kind of roam about in response to emergencies, and people kind of started flinging stuff at you, and it was really unexpected. And yeah, we had a couple of problems that did occur during that festival, and I found it to be, in the time that I worked in security, probably the toughest one ever. Yeah.
Do you look forward to a rainy festival because it's going to be more chill, or does that not make a difference?
I think I look forward to and dread rainy festivals for different reasons. I think it would be more chill in terms of people are not very mobile, I suppose. Either that means they're stuck in their tents not wanting to go out, or they'll stay under their kind of roofed how do you call it, like arena or stage, particularly if it's a festival with multiple stages. Or gazebos, precisely. Yeah. So that usually means people, unless you're particularly adventurous or you come with your wellies and your umbrella and all the rest of it, will pretty much stay where they are. On the flip side, it makes security much tougher because, especially again, if you are someone who's entrusted to be a response unit, and it's your job to kind of roam about in large areas, or if you have to respond to a fight, someone's passed out, there's been a theft or an assault or something like that, then it can be really tough to move about. So maybe the kind of immobility is not something to always cheer, except when it when it affects security, being able to move about.
It's funny because we focused on the aggression and the conflict management, but you've mentioned something there, which is welfare, and people are poorly And actually, you're the ones quite often who are there to help. That's your role. And how much of that is pushed on you by festivals to say, well, actually, you are the face of the festival, and the welfare of our clients is in your hands?
I'd say, if you ask me particularly, I have never had a problem providing welfare, and I've usually been quite proactive about it. And I suppose we're talking about welfare as opposed to immediate medical care.
Yeah,
where of course
you've always got people they've done too much drink, done too much drugs, and they just need someone to get them to medical. You have that. We've seen it.
Yes, precisely, and it's a really important function, particularly because, and this half goes back to the idea of conflict management, right? As in the kind of tell someone don't touch me, as opposed to putting your hands on them. If you're able to solve a welfare incident like that, precisely, for example, someone being a little bit too drunk, you can prevent it from becoming something that's seriously worse. If you can see someone's becoming a bit rowdy, you can see maybe they've had a little bit much to drink and stuff like that. Try and intervene, make sure they aren't served anymore. Try and get them to drink more water. If there are people who are irritated by the drunkard, try and kind of pull them away. That's all part of the welfare, for sure. And the same thing might go for drug use, trying to take people to medical attention if you see something wrong. For sure, it is something that's quite big, and I think something that's quite important in the long run, because it actually prevents more serious issues from cropping up later.
On the handing out water, have you ever done the gig at security where you're in front of the stage, in between the stage and the crowd, handing out glasses of water? Now, are those jobs any fun at all? Because you've got your back to the artist. I don't know. I've always wondered whether those security guards are having a good time.
Well, I know that, paying too much attention to the art. Well, I suppose it depends where you are. If you're on the front of the stage, then you probably would be told off by a supervisor if you're looking at the the artist too much, because they'd say, well, you're not paying attention to if someone needs anything. But of course, we are all entirely human. I put my hand up, of course, if you have, good artists or something like that, you would want to see what they're doing, particularly if it's something, quite whatever. But yeah, no, handing out water for sure is a really necessary function. And, I have had a couple of moments where people do pass out either on the barrier or kind of just behind. And then, what turns into, really nice time with, the artist singing or doing whatever, turns into quite an emergency, because now you've got to go out into the crowd and kind of pick this person up. But for sure, I mean, yeah, you would like to be looking at the artist for sure.
It just reminds me, Bill, of when we were at Glastonbury, and our friend randomly, some person picked him up and he just began crowd surfing, and the look on the security people's faces, they were all absolutely, you could see them panicking, and poor James, he didn't know what was going on. He was giving them the thumbs up. He was like, I'm fine. But yeah, I just can only imagine the thoughts going through those security people's heads when they saw this poor little man getting crowd surfed across. They were probably like, oh my God.
Look, if you fall in that crowd, you vanish. You're trusting the people around you to pick you up. That's a scary moment.
Oh, yeah. So I was going to say that there's also quite a lot of really, really, not panicked. Obviously, you have to be quite professional over the radio, but urgent radio chatter when something like that happens, particularly if it's quite condensed, or if the crowd's quite a bit active, or there is really strict instructions that people can't be crowd surfing and stuff like that. There will be calls saying, whoever's on, kind of stage, you've got to get there, you've got to indicate. Maybe you have to stand up on the barriers and kind of do an indicating. But because obviously it's so loud and there's music pumping, no one can hear you. And I mean, people might even be really irritated saying, who's this idiot in the high vis, kind of blocking me from seeing the artist. But really, we're trying to make sure someone doesn't experience something quite terrible.
I've always wondered, is the radio chatter, when there's a flare, does it go crazy? Because when there's like either one of those paint flares or the light up ones, I don't really know what they're called, but is it, because you always see security like always looking around, so is the radio chatter crazy when there's a flare?
Yeah, no, for sure. I'd say there is. I mean, if it's and obviously we're assuming like a really kind of full arena stage, then for sure. But I've seen it, a flare kind of pulled up in an arena or a gazebo where there actually isn't that many people there, and obviously like it's notified, but it's not as
you're like, what, the vibe's not there, bro.
Exactly. Like if there's not that
you
many
just give
people,
them a big thumbs down, you're like disappointed.
simply just really really kind of poor form. So for those times it'll be less kind of, we need to get that down right away, someone go over and stuff. So more something like Keenan or call sign, someone's got a flare, just confiscate it. It's a bit sad, it's a bit deflated. I just put this guy.
I'm not angry, I'm just disappointed.
Do you have a cool call sign? Do you have a choice?
Oh, I would love to have like my own personalized call sign. It would be absolutely fantastic, and I could just have it as mine. But no, at least for my security company, and I mean I've been kind of outsourced to others as well. The kind of standard where you're given your call sign is where you're kind of based or what you're doing. So the naming kind of codes things like Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta. I can't remember what it was called.
It's not the phonetic alphabet.
Is it the NATO alphabet? Or I just made that up? I don't know.
Yeah.
Is it? I don't know.
I think it's called
something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I can't remember exactly. Something like that, yeah. So if you're doing searches, you might be called, for example, Sierra. Like the supervisor would have Sierra 1, and then everyone would be Sierra 2, 3, 4. If you were on main stage, it might be Mike or stuff like that. But I do remember one time when I was working a marathon, and it was coming towards the end of the shift, and I went from being a kind of static static sort of security person to being asked to fill in for a role for a supervisor who had to leave kind of later. And I kind of just asked, just before I left like the main control stage, I was like, okay, so technically my call sign's changing. It'd be pretty nice if I was called Kilo Tango, KT, which is like my full name.
So cool.
That's cool.
And I think I was given Kilo, which I could settle with, and I was very happy with. So I was called Kilo.
I love the idea that like they're like, Mike, come in, and it could be some like hello, like a little old lady, like hello everyone. Yeah, if someone was saying Mike over the radio and that was supposed to mean me, I would so forget. I'd be like, who's Mike? Why they want Mike?
Yeah, no, exactly. It's something you have to kind of get used to, because I think there are a couple of them. Mike is one, Oscar is another one, Charlie is another one. Those are all parts of the official alphabet, but they're also common like boys' names, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like I would just be like, who's Mike? Who's Oscar?
So at Boomtown this year, I was downtown camping supervisor, and I was like, that's not a bad name.
Downtown.
That is a very cool supervisor.
Where are you? I'm downtown
supervisor.
Yeah. It was just a lot of tents, just people sleeping in fields. That's all it was, but still.
Yeah, but it was downtown, and it was your downtown.
Yeah. If you could pick your nickname, what would your nickname be? Like literally anything. It doesn't have to be like the NATO alphabet.
If I could pick a nickname, like over the radio.
Yeah. It has to be like, I would say like one syllable, because if you're like supercalifragilistic, like no one's going to have time to say that.
No, for sure. Slightly concerning name, but it would be Maverick.
Oh,
that's
a good one.
Oh, but then Goose would be a great one. You'd have to have a Goose to your Maverick.
Goose, absolutely. Yeah, like if we were like a roaming team, and I might be the supervisor, it's Maverick, and then the kind of partners, the is the goose.
That would be
And
so.
he's
That would be
always
incredible.
walking a meter behind you in absolute line.
And he's always making a nyom sort of sound just
Telling
for
you what
this.
stuff is.
Oh my
Your
God, I'm
exits
trying
are
to
here.
imagine that.
Oh, that would be so good.
Oh my gosh.
See now, like if you had a buddy, you'd have to do like a little duo name. Like it would, you'd have to collaborate.
It has to be. It's yeah.
I think we've digressed from what was the incredibly serious role that security do at festivals to the, do you have someone you could call your goose?
Who's the goose to your maverick?
I think that's a sign we should probably ask our final questions and wrap up.
Yeah.
So when we met, you were early 20s. You were already a supervisor of other security guards, which is phenomenal. And I think it says a lot about how you carry yourself as well. Have you done any other gigs other than being a supervisor? Is there anything else that goes on at festivals that you get involved with?
Yes. So actually for the build-up or the build period for Glastonbury and also for one or two festivals, kind of in my last year, in that year, I was working in security control, which for me was a combination of both really challenging and stressful, but also incredibly rewarding. And just as a kind of explanation for anyone who might not know, working in security control obviously means that you sit in a control room with, for example, event management, representatives of like the event, representatives from police, medics, traffic control, Oxfam, actually, now that I think about it.
Oxfam in the house.
Woo woo.
Hey, shout out. And essentially, you there's no kind of on the ground rotations and moving about, but you're sat in a chair or pacing about, perhaps if it warrants it, giving radio instructions and working with the manager to not just kind of rotate people if they need to be rotated, obviously on the instruction of the client, but also being able to solve problems. And I found that really cool because I first started out as a logger. So you had to learn by osmosis. You had someone else kind of on the radio. And what a logger was essentially going on the Excel spreadsheet and kind of logging calls because, as one can imagine, for security and for other types of services at an event, you have to kind of log when things happen. So every time there's a call, switching someone around, if someone's reported a fight, if someone's been reported to being taken to the medics or drugs have been confiscated, you have to log in every single bit of that because if there's any kind of dispute as to when it happened or how it happened, then they will obviously go back to control. But working as a controller, I think was really, really cool, dealing with like a lot of issues like that. Yeah.
That sounds really cool. I'm picturing
Sounds
this
stressful.
room surrounded by screens and
I'm
like, everyone's
picturing, like-
super serious.
Yeah, I'm picturing like a submarine, and I'm picturing like radars. Like I know it's not that, but I'm picturing like beeping. I'm picturing like flashing lights, buttons. Like
Because I can see why it'd be mad serious in there because you've got the population of a small town or in the case of Glastonbury, a city, and you are trying to make sure that everyone's okay. That is it really stressful, that environment? In fact, is that more stressful than being on like out with people?
I would say that it's more stressful. And of course, it's entirely dependent on people. The people who are listening to this, who might work in security and find that actually being on the ground dealing with situation could be quite tough. And I have dealt with very tough situations on the ground, but I remember remarking to a good friend of mine in security when I kind of did my first couple of shifts as security. And I said to him, which I think is relevant, that when you're working on the ground, no matter how tough a situation you're dealing with, you can always reference control. Like when we talk over the radio, you kind of give your call sign and then you'll say who you're giving the message to. And if you're giving a message to control, which is this kind of almost God in a sense, I like to say, because they're kind of just there. You don't see them, but they give you instructions in your head and you have to go and do things. And when you're on the ground, you can ask control for help. Control, can you please advise me? Where do I need to be next? And they give you. But when you're in the control room, like you are the final point of call. So not having that insurance not really being able to reference someone else, particularly if the managers are on the ground and stuff like that. You really have to have really strong decision-making skills, because you can't rely on anyone else, particularly if you're kind of stretched for staff. So, the client, will only be able to pay for a certain amount of security personnel up to a finite number. But actually, if there are multiple fights, multiple issues and stuff like that, you have to strategically, a bit like a game of chess, really, move people about in certain ways. But when people kind of move, you have to ensure that their place is kind of taken over by someone, or certain people can't be moved at all, for example, because they're protecting, important work and stuff. So, yeah, I found security control more stressful for sure.
Yeah, I get that, because we've been told, haven't we, Tilly, that there's some things that we don't get to decide, and we have to relay it to our control, who then relays it to festival control, like you're mentioning, and then that comes back to us, and they say, yes, you can close this lane. Like, really? But it comes down to, if something goes wrong, that a process was followed, we have a record of what was changed, and this is why the decision was made. And for a lot of people who just show up at a festival and think everything just works, I think it's really interesting to know the amount of effort that goes into keeping everybody safe. And I think it's, we poke fun at festivals, and we especially poke fun at them when things go wrong. But the absence of things that have gone wrong at a festival in terms of people's safety is quite an achievement, actually. And it's a rare case where I'll give them credit.
Good job.
Yeah. Next episode, we'll just lay into them for something being wrong. But they do. Yeah, it's phenomenal, the amount of effort that goes in, and I'm always in awe of it.
Well, my last question. I've been sitting on this for the whole episode, so I do apologise, but I'm gonna have to ask, what's the craziest thing you've seen work in security? Because it's my favourite question ever.
Oh, I think I've seen several crazy things. I suppose you're looking for something that's kind of more upbeat than like somber.
Yeah, we'll go for like maybe like a funny crazy.
Yeah, let's finish on a high.
Yeah, finish on a high. Yeah, no, it's definitely not the one I had immediately on my head, for sure.
To be fair, when you were speaking about wellies earlier, it reminded me of my first Glastonbury in 2019. Bill, I don't know if you remember when we had a runner at Glastonbury, and the security guard managed to catch up with him, but wearing wellies, and we were dead impressed with this security guard who literally was wearing the biggest wellies I've ever seen in my life. Like he looked like a cartoon, and he still managed to catch up with this guy. I think we all clapped. We gave him a standing ovation when he came back. We were like, great job.
Great job. Honestly, I think honestly, in light of that, and it's not to kind of copycat, but honestly, when I think about it, I think it would have to be chasing a runner. And it is funny because some people really just kind of like it's not really, they don't really notice what they've done. They just kind of, oh well, you caught me, haven't you? Like I remember, because I was supervisor, like we said, of Worthy View in Glastonbury, and obviously we did have a couple of runners, and unfortunately some of them successful managed to go through. And I remember herring after this guy and a small thing of security. Obviously you've got to leave some people back, right, to monitor tickets and stuff, all the while panting over, giving kind of instructions over the radio. Sorry, not instructions, but informing control currently in pursuit, wearing, I don't know, brown hair or IC2 or whatever. And you eventually catch the guy.
Goose, where is he? Where is he, Goose?
Yeah, exactly.
Duck, Goose.
Yeah. Exactly. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I think I had several gooses with me, and luckily they managed to help me find the guy eventually. And when you kind of catch them, they're like,
there was a flock of you.
That's the shit, isn't it? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
I'll get my coat.
Just a bit they're just a bit like, oh, that's a bit shit, isn't it? And I almost want to laugh because it's like I've been chasing after you, and I would probably get in trouble if you went through and stuff. And it's like, oh well, good luck next year. Something like that.
I love the idea that it's like almost like a playground game. They're like, "Oh, you caught me. Guess I have to go home." Like, like that must be a really that for them that must be humbling. Like they're like, "Oh, guess I gotta leave."
Exactly. Honestly, and not knowing sometimes what the trouble might have been caused, or what might have happened if we moved. But it's kind of like after the shift, when you kind of sat down, you're in the mess tent and stuff like that, and everyone kind of shares their day, 12-hour shifts and everything, and you go and say that, and you go and like share that story, then everyone laughs, and it is funny like afterwards.
Yeah. Oh, I'm always so impressed every time like security managed to catch a runner, because I can never, like, I never even realize what happens. People shout runner, I'm like, huh? What? And then by that time, like about 5 security have already absolutely zoomed past, and it's so impressive.
Out the pass, chasing him down, yeah, for sure. And we don't usually stop until we've managed to catch them, as long as they're in eyesight. But yeah.
I imagine being a rugby player helps in that situation.
Yeah.
Oh,
they're like,
sure.
picture them as the ball, and they're like,
exactly, for sure. I think the rugby skills came in really useful then.
You've been listening to Festival Sounds. Please give us a follow on Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast. And why don't you visit festivalsounds.co.uk? We finally got our website up and running.
how exciting. And tell a friend about us. Why not? Spread the love.
Yeah, absolutely. Share this episode with one of your friends who's going to a festival next year, and maybe they'll enjoy it and you'll help us grow the show. And we appreciate that. Big love.